all. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Vagdasi Patel, working as a program manager at Headstart. And I would like to, before starting the session, I would like to brief you about the Headstart. That what is Headstart, how we are doing this, and what is really upcoming things in a very near time. So, Headstart Network is India's largest volunteer driven grassroots level organization supporting entrepreneurship and startup with a presence in 25 plus cities. And it used to conduct 200 plus meetups in a year across like India, impacting over 20K lives through its activities such as mentoring, kickstart, funding and everything. So it's happening since last 15 years. This year we have completed a successful 15 years in the ecosystem. Last year we celebrated Startup September, which had huge successful journey where we hosted 210 plus experts with 56 virtual session and 20 plus offline meetups. This year also we are having the same celebration, which we almost had end week of Startup September, and which is already ongoing for a few more days. So throughout the month, celebration is gonna be there, and also, in the 15th of October, we are having the HSX coming annual celebration of Head Start with different themes and side events will be there, workshops will be there. So it will be a massive celebration there. I would like to invite you all to look at the HSX and apply for the event, as this time we are gonna pick a really interesting people for the HSX. So follow our LinkedIn page for the recent updates about HSX and upcoming events, right? To enable the startups by having the funding opportunities, Headstart had initiated Bharat Pitchathon in last month of August, where we had covered first round of pitching in almost 20 plus chapters across PAN. So, folks who are listening me right now would love to invite you all to be part of this, 15th of October celebration. So, apart than this, we are thankful to Sativa Media, especially Camila and Rahul, who had pulled this sustainable session series as a part of Startup September, and made this Startup September a really impactful for the sustainable domain. So thank you for having this, Sativa Media. I would like to hand over this session to Camila.
Thank you so much, Vagdasi, and thank you to Headstart for partnering with us on this journey, sustainable journey. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being part of today's session. This is our last week, and we have this session and tomorrow's session. My name is Camila, and I am the co-founder of Sativa Media. Sativa Media is one of the few platforms in India that focuses on creating awareness and education towards sustainability, the SDGs, and the cannabis industry in India. Last year at Startup September, we had a few sessions about the hemp industry in India and how hemp can pave the way to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This year, we were happy to continue our partnership with Headstart, and we're hosting 8 online sessions. These are the last 2 that target different aspects of the sustainability world. If you want to see the previous sessions, you will find them on our website or on YouTube. And along with these sessions, we also hosted a women-focused offline event supported by Hemp Street called Women First, which was last Saturday in Bangalore, where we launched a report on the importance of championing women in order to achieve the SDGs. Today, like I said, is our 7th session, and along with Dr. Nitin, Amit, and Arpit, we will discuss key points around ESG reporting. With this, I'd like to introduce Arpit. Thank you, Arpit, so much for moderating this session. Over to you.
Yeah, hi. So first of all, I would like to begin by saying that I'm grateful for the opportunity to sort of be the moderator for this session, and it's a very relevant topic. So it's a great initiative to actually have a conversation around this. And it's increasingly important in today's world to actually try and evaluate the impacts of environment, social, and governance, and its relevance to business. So now, while most businesses think that ESG is sort of an onerous exercise, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of investments, it takes away time and resources from the company. What we will try and look at today, and especially from the perspective of startup ecosystems, is how it can also unlock value for you. So I would just like to begin by setting a brief context and just helping to understand what we basically mean by ESG, right? So the E generally stands for environmental issues, and with the global depletion of resources and the threat of climate change, there are a lot of issues that can impact a company from the environmental front. These typical environmental issues, revolve around management of your carbon emissions, which contribute to global warming, the product carbon footprint of your products. If in your operating locations you're facing any water scarcity, if there are any pollution control norms that require you to limit your emissions below a certain level, how you manage your waste, leverage circular economy, and so on. So, environmental issues are typically the ones that generally get mentioned when we talk about sustainability. There's a sort of perspective to lean heavily on the environmental issues, but sometimes we also forget the S and the G aspect of ESG and sustainability. So, social criteria actually considers how a company manages relationships with all its stakeholders. So, not just limited to its own employees, but also with its customers, suppliers, and local communities that it works with. So there are challenges around creating proper working conditions for all employees, guaranteeing human rights within your own operations and within supply chain, uh, enforcing principles of diversity and inclusivity, so that you're looking at a diverse workforce, not just from a gender diversity point of view, but also from including other marginalized communities and socially disadvantaged groups. So there is a lot of perspective also around social issues. And in today's world, where the millennial customer is also more conscious, they are more aware, they are also choosing brands which embrace sustainability, and they are actually punishing brands by moving away from brands that do not promote social sustainability. And finally, governance related issues are typically related to corporate governance and ethics. So there will be a lot of issues around governance, ownership and control, board level management and oversight, accounting, business ethics, and tax transparency. There have been recent controversies around companies leveraging tax havens, evading taxes, having unscrupulous methods of board level management. So all of these aspects are sort of dealt with the G aspect of ESG. Now, why is it important in today's world? We have recently seen a growing consumer activism and shareholder activism around, punishing companies or portraying companies in negative media light if there are any violations that they're doing. In the early 90s and early 2000s, we saw a lot of activism around textile companies and apparel companies, whether it's the Nikes or the Levi's of the world, where they were accused of running sweatshops in developing nations. Similarly, there were a lot of oil spills, BP, Exxon Valdez, that happened in the Pacific and Atlantic, which caused significant harm to marine life and the biodiversity ecosystem of aquatic regions. So there was intense scrutiny on these oil and gas companies, and also they had to pay a significant amount of their revenues and profits in terms of fines and litigation costs to sort of deal with the oil spills. Similarly, one of the more recent examples in around 2013 was the collapse of a building in Bangladesh called the Rana Plaza, where about more than 1,100 workers were killed because the working conditions were unsafe. People were crammed in one room, and the building just collapsed because there was no oversight. And all major big brands were sort of running sweatshops in this sort of a building. An automobile company, Volkswagen, was punished in around 2015 for evading emission control norms. They had to pay huge amounts of fines. Their CEO had to resign, and there was immense negative publicity on their products. And they've actually had to work over the past decade to sort of renew their vision and mission, and sort of show a commitment to clean energy, electric vehicles, and their commitment to sort of reduce carbon emissions. So there are plenty of examples available today, and it's becoming increasingly important for all companies to embrace ESG, but startups specifically, because there's recently a lot of focus around ESG investing and impact investing. So this sort of distinction today is being created by investors and especially venture capitalists. So there are two major developments today in the sustainable finance landscape. So institutional investors today, the requirements for ESG have evolved. The global ESG assets under management today are expected to reach $53 trillion by 2025, and this will account for nearly one third of the total asset under management in the world. So investors are looking to ESG assessment as a tool for creating value for their portfolios, create long-term value. They are divesting from carbon-related assets and typically polluting industries. A significant signifier of this is the memberships to the Principles of Responsible Investment, where there has been a jump of about 42% registrations by asset owners and managers over the last year, where they are signing up to the UN Principles of Responsible Investing, and they are sort of signing up and committing to invest in socially conscious processes. The other type of investing that we see generally is around impact investing. So while ESG investments is more around evaluating outcomes, impact investing is more about intent. So venture capitalists and private equity firms today are also heavily investing in impact, and they want to see impact around social value or social good that the companies create, environmental value that the companies create. So there's a changing paradigm today. There is increasing talks. There's a lot of value to be unlocked, especially within the startup ecosystem. So with that brief background, and I'll keep pitching in whenever I can in today's session, but with that brief background, I think we can begin today's session. And Camilla, should we invite this first speaker to sort of present their session?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, everyone. Camilla, Patel, and Ankit for the opening statements for this wonderful event we are having today. Now, today we are all here to give some sort of insights about what this space is all about. Ankit is very nicely framed about what is happening in E, S, and G, the importance of all three aspects of ESG and sustainability altogether, the events which has already happened in the entire world, which has made people think about doing something in this space. So we would like to put some light on how exactly startups or the new companies who are coming to business have to keep their eye on these concepts like ESG, sustainability. Yes, we all understand that is not a priority for any startup when they actually want to launch something, want to establish something. But if we also can give them some idea about that is important element for your business from the day one, then I think that can become a crucial element for all those startups to have their journey more sustainable enough. So few tips about sustainability for the startups. We all understand that they have their own struggle in terms of funding, managing their expenses, dealing with their idea, and then that curation program or accelerator program, looking for investors, looking for the potential customers, the first few people who can trust on them. At the same time, you have to develop two things, I believe. One is the competence. I'm not talking about the competence you already have for your particular startup, but in terms of sustainability also, if you see that how you can gain some sort of competence to understand these glossaries or terminologies about ESG and things which come under the purview of environmental part. If you are a manufacturing startup, then you have to start thinking about what sort of chemicals you are using or hazardous substances you are using. What is your energy intensity? We are all talking about making natural resources as less as possible. Seeing that your entire business venture or the business model you are coming up with, which has some sort of emissions through your transportation of raw material, or you're supplying goods and services to your customers. So in the beginning also, if you think about having some sort of processes and systems which can take care of all those environmental parts, then would be good enough. But it is not necessary that each startup has these ideas and this knowledge in the beginning. So generally we have to develop this competence, and that is where we always say that we have to keep looking for new knowledge, or looking for experts who can play some role to develop those sort of competence. Now, once we have minimum competence required to also take care of the sustainable part, I have just spoken about the environmental part, but you also have to think about how you can have good working conditions. You have, balanced diversity or inclusion management in the beginning of your, startup or venture, where your team is generally balanced. You have, good quality people, technically sound people. If you have a small board or advisory team, then you also have a good mix of people who are coming from different industry, that different know-how, so that way you can take care of your social element for ESG part. At the same time, look for systems, look for softwares, look for best practices which can help you establish the governance part of your overall ecosystem which you want to build through your startup. So that way you have to always look for those additional competence required, or spend some money or time also to develop or gain expertise in terms of these competence. When we establish competence, we also have to see that how we can slowly cultivate that into a kind of a culture. So first 2-3 years of any startup, I would advise or give some tips that how you can start training your people, and that will slowly convert into kind of values you want to build through your overall ecosystem or startup. So have training programs, then some sort of evaluation measurements or metrics or KPIs, or review or monitoring, which can push people to think about these things, and this does not go in any corner of your organization or overall business model. So competence and value, these are the two things you will require as a fresh startup for first 1,000 days of your launch or establishment of your startup or company. So these are a few things. Now we already have seen the elaborative way where Arpit has given idea about what is happening around the world, why this space is becoming so crazy, and investors are looking for these, customers are looking for these, the regulatory bodies are looking for these. So this is important subject, and I would say a buzzword right now in last 4-5 years for all the different types of sectors. When a company implement ESG, when company implement sustainability, or they do something to drive their overall decarbonization strategy or net zero strategy, or making their company more robust enough or governance compliant company, there has to be a mechanism which can help them evaluate where exactly they are going, right? So there are a lot of different frameworks available in the entire world which can help us evaluate where we are. So for those international companies, Fortune 500 companies, multinational corporations, they do push their supplier, their customers, to even go for those global frameworks where you can disclose, where you can report your things happening under the sustainability arm of your company. Same way, each country is also coming up with their legislation. So India, being one of the important economy right now in the world, they have also come up with a kind of a legislation or a regulatory requirement for all those listed companies. Okay, why I want to bring this to the entire audience today? Because today we are a startup, today we are a small company, but tomorrow we can become one of the unicorn from India, one of the biggest launch of a successful company from India. So when we are growing, when we are looking for acquiring customers, looking for acquiring technologies, we also have to keep our eye on those regulatory changes coming to industry. In any sector you are, you have to have those insights and that particular legal knowledge about those reporting requirements in India. So there is something called as business responsibility and sustainability reporting, BRSR, in India, which has made mandatory for top 1,000 listed companies in India, and these financial year onwards, they have to disclose their information on what they are actually doing in sustainability and ESG space. And there are many other global reporting frameworks also. Like if I talk about top 5 reporting frameworks around the world, then there is something called as GRI, which is the most popular reporting framework around the world. And Fortune 500 companies, if you are supplying to any multinational corporations, then they might ask you to just follow that or fill those requirements and give them idea what exactly they are doing. GRI is mostly adopted reporting framework. Apart from that, there are a couple of more frameworks which are also becoming popular. SASB is one of them, CDP is there, TCFD is there, there's something called a science-based target initiative, SBTI is there. A lot of things are happening in this space also. So just a small, tip of advice for all these startups and the companies who are going to become good enough doing, business in future and trying to solve problems for themselves and customers and the entire ecosystem. They have to keep their eye on this. Now for evaluation, you can either have your own internal framework which you can use. So being, one of the global consulting company, we go to our clients and then also explore some sort of mechanism on evaluation we also have internally created. So we have, like, for entire ES and G, we have 30 factors evaluation mechanism which we have internally created, which is patented under Growlity. And on the basis of this detailed mechanism, the research we have done in this space, this year I was also awarded as the honorary doctorate for this particular deep research. In these 30 factors, we have 12 factors for environmental elements. Arpit has mostly covered all those things: biodiversity, energy, waste, greenhouse gas emissions, your hazardous substances and all those things. In social, yes, diversity, working condition, your good and health related element for your people, then community development, CSR, a lot of stuff over there as well. And governance, yes, transparency, your stakeholder engagement, your investors relations, and a lot of things in terms of reporting, partnerships with different organizations. So that gives us like 30 different factors, and we have 6 level assessment criteria for each factor. And for each of these 30 factors, we have 10 questions for each factor. So that way we have like 300 deep questions, and we go to any company, whether it is into manufacturing or service industry. We carry out these 30 into 6, that is like 1500 can be the total score, and we then rate them on the scale of 0 to 1500, and then we just tell them that you are here. In fact, those 6 different levels are also defined in a way where we tell them that you are at a beginner level, or struggling level, or intermediate level, or achiever level, or world-class level, something like that. So these are all the things. Different companies and their in-house team, their mentors, their advisors can always give their creative juice to create or evaluate or develop something as your own, or take help of people like us. But ultimately, the point which we want to make here is you have to keep your eye on the sort of competence, values required to establish your sustainability related culture. And then you also have to have a kind of a mechanism where you can always go back and see or align yourself and measure the progress, what is happening in each area. And that way you can make your next course of actions more robust enough or concrete enough. So I think from me, these are all the things, tips, you can say tips, insights for all the people joining us today. And I believe if you really work on these, and that can make our life easy in the future. Over to Arpit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nitin, for that wonderful insight. And you have very rightly sort of pointed out why it is important for some of these startups to integrate ESG, because even though they are not listed companies, even though there might not be any regulatory requirement for them to disclose a lot of these things or action, one day they might become a bigger company. And what generally research shows and experience also shows that at least I have felt personally when I've worked with companies, retrofitting a company's culture with to solve ESG issues is much more difficult than if a company embeds ESG from the absolute beginning and at the absolute start. So having conscious businesses that care about employees, that care about diversity, that care about environmental norms and go beyond compliance norms and actually create sustainable products is much better. So if your business model itself is embedded in core roots of sustainability, you are set on a right path to success. And in today's world that is changing, we can see that traditional companies like the traditional oil and gas companies, traditional textile companies, they are facing a lot of heat around adapting to climate change, reducing the carbon emissions. A lot of these companies are facing extinction today because they are unable to adapt or move at the pace that is required. So while you look at a global auto major like Volvo, which has committed to sort of transition to ESG vehicles, like they will not manufacture polluting vehicles after 2030 anymore. They will only make EVs. There are other companies like General Motors and BMWs who are struggling now to sort of adapt or catch up to industry leaders. And this change was brought about by a sort of a startup company, if you can call it that. But Tesla sort of revolutionized or changed the whole trajectory of how the automobile industry was evolving, and it has become a disruptor today just by virtue of the sustainable product that it is marketing. And it can adapt, it can be the solution of the future. So it's absolutely important to integrate it. But I think from your talk that you gave, Dr. Nitin, just couple of reflections and questions. At any beginning point of a startup, there might be other priorities that the founders may focus on, like hiring the best talent, or getting the returns or the valuation that their investors are demanding from them. So in that case, how would you sort of recommend them to balance their priorities? So they also have to show returns, they also have to show a profitable business model, but at the same time be sustainable and embed ESG. So how do they sort of then navigate this challenge or this trade-off that might exist between doing the business and focusing on ESG issues? You're on mute, Dr.
We are so fortunate to be part of a lot of accelerator programs, and people do come to us as to mentor their startups, and we are the people who are actually encouraging young entrepreneurs to bring something as a creative idea and convert that into business. Now I have my theory which I have implemented in my company, that you have to follow a kind of 100 and 1,000 days of theory. So first 100 days, which is like 3 months from the idea or scratch you do for your particular startup, you should be more focused on the problem solving which you want to bring from your startup. I would not say that it does not include your sustainability related long-term plan, but you are not required to actually keep your eye completely on sustainability and ESG and don't focus on the problem which you want to solve for the people around the world. So focus in first 100 days, especially first 50 days, you focus on the problem solving approach or the kind of an idea you want to explore. Yes, we all understand that you have team challenge, you have your idea validation challenge, you have your initial funding or bootstrapping challenge. A lot of things happen. But the moment you cross your 100 day, then you are in the orbit of your remaining 900 days to actually validate your idea and then to tell your story on a louder noise to the entire world. That is a time you have to start making your mind and thinking about bringing those concepts like ESG, not on a very large level, but maybe I would say that once you cross 50 people company, then you have to have someone who can take care of those things. And then you start looking for softwares or tools which can help you make your life easy. So 1,000 days is like 3 years time. So once you cross first year or second year, then you have to have your emissions calculation in place, or you have to have your diversity related stuff in place, because the people who are going to come and fund you next round, third, fourth, fifth round, they are going to ask you all these things. If you are completely blank, then you are out of the game, because to attract your investor also, you have to have something which they feel as a value, or they feel as a strong, robust foundation for your startup, and then they might get attracted to this. This is all from myself.
Thank you. And that was very aptly put, because, it's not just about the initial rounds of funding, but the sustainability of the business itself, how you are going to continue attracting investors and capital. And investors today just, want to invest in businesses that are risk-free, that do not face any disruptions, that will be able to adapt to the green economy that the world is sort of moving towards. And interestingly, as statistics would show from a CNBC research, in 2015, while investing in ESG was only used to make up only about USD 5 billion. Today it has grown tenfold, and it's about at $51 billion already. So it is only set to increase in the future, and investors are also going to be consciously investing in these companies. So that was very accurately put, and thank you, Dr. Nitin, for your insights and guidance for ESG, integrating ESG within startup ecosystems. With that, I sort of would invite Amit to take the next segment of this session today and present his thoughts and insights around how to integrate ESG within the startup ecosystem. So over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Arpit, and thanks, Dr. Nitin, for guiding us through all your insights and everything. So I think one of the main thing that we should focus upon, that the startup should focus upon, is upon the investors in the first stage. What the investors, have in mind, what is the aim of the investors, what is the ROI? ROI will be always there, but the non-financial aspect should be the key focus area as well. So from the investor point of view, I think Arpit correctly mentioned about the UNPRI status as well. So currently in UNPRI, UNPRI is basically is a principle of responsible investments, which were developed by international group of institution of investors, reflecting increasing relevance of environment, social, and governance. So it has around 6 principles in it, where an investor has to abide those 6 principles and have to responsibly invest in these companies. So those companies could be any startups or even established companies as well, so that there's no any limitation to that. So in the signing of the principles, the investor publicly commit to adopt and implement them and consistent within the fiduciary responsibilities. So apparently the investors believe that they will improve their ability to meet the commitments, or enhance the ESG or responsible investment procedures in their portfolio companies or even the investee companies. So that's one of the process that investor company does. But before becoming a UNPRI member, so they need to have a responsible investment policy, ESG policy within their own system, so that they can invest in your startup companies. So they they have to take their own initiatives. So what's an RI policy? Basically, RI policy is an abbreviation of responsible investment policy. So it's a policy which articulates the approach towards ESG integration and ensuring every investment made by the fund demonstrates good corporate governance and business ethics, and inculcating all environment and social aspect as well. So those are the key factors that the investor seeks, or the investor does from his end. What a startup should do is basically to take initiatives. Anyone can create policies. They can have their ESG policies, they can have their EHS policies, health and safety, everything policy can be done. That's the base. But again, the initiatives are the main prospectus for growing into ESG factors. So apparently, let's say for example, even if you have a ESG policy or EHS policy, you have a health and safety policy in place. But what are the initiatives that one company takes in that health and safety aspect? That takes into consideration. While all those ESG rating companies see these small initiatives and rate you according to it. If you have fulfilled all these conditions, then you're obviously going to get a higher score in your ESG ratings. And once you get a higher score, you're going to attract more and more investors, like big investors, who's going to invest heavily. And your company's value is also going to increase. So the increase in value can also be done through ESGs as well. Subtract addition to it. So what do I mean by ESG is basically due diligence. So investor company normally hires any external third-party consultant, and they send it to your factories or your offices, and have to check upon all the factors of ESG. So they'll see if there are any red flags or not. If there aren't any red flags, that means your value is going to increase. If there are red flags, unfortunately, your value is going to decrease. So you have to be prepared in the future that even any big investors comes along, so there should not be any red flags into it, and that will increase your value. So this session is always about increasing your startup value in terms of ESG and financial as well. So we know sustainability doesn't mean only ESG or non-financial. It means that you're going to grow, having a healthy ROI, as well as you're taking care of the environment, social, and other stakeholders. So that's one of the key focus area that the startup should have, not within themselves, but also to the stakeholders. Stakeholders also do have suppliers. So that's where the responsible supplier comes. So normally not every supplier is responsible nowadays, but that's the responsibility of the company to help them become responsible. So what do I mean by responsible is basically, let's say for example, you have an agriculture company, right? Let's say you have a egg producing or egg transportation company, right? And normally you buy eggs from the farms. So how do you ensure that the chickens which have been fed or which have been kept in the farm and kept in a proper condition or being properly treated well, or everything, it should be humanity wise. So that is one of the main points that needs to be considered as responsible suppliers. If they adhere to all those necessary government regulations, have a specific diversity and inclusion policies, they have regular audits and checks, they do have every health and safety checks as well. That means they are a responsible suppliers. Yes, sometimes you may not have it. So that's the responsibility of the company to train them, to advise them, go to any third-party consultant, get trained, get a proper awareness to it. And that's suppliers part. Customers, you have to treat the customers not only time of purchasing or having interaction, after purchasing services as well. That's the point where customers value your company the most. Once the customer value the company, you're going to have a good rating. There's a NPS, Net Promoter Score, where has a customer satisfaction linked to it. Higher the NPS, higher the value of your company is going to get while doing the ESG or having valuation from the company from an investor point of view. So these are the small things that not every startup is has an idea about. But once you start to inculcate all these factors into your operations, your value is going to increase. And that is the fact that ESG, being an ESG friendly company, gonna many times fold your value as well while in the markets. So those are the things that company needs to focus upon the first 3 years. I think that's Dr. Nitin also said. First 3 years are the very main phase. You can distribute your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Like phase 1, build a foundation. Phase 2, have people who can take responsibility and have specific rules. Phase 3 could be take initiatives and report them accurately and appropriately, so that the ESG rating companies or even the investors can see what you have done past 3 or 2 years, which are going to impact your value too. So these are the few factors that one may consider. And one of the main consider that startup can take into place is corporate governance. So corporate governance doesn't mean only the policies. It also means the roles and responsibilities. Every company has an audit committee, but very few people know that audit committee can also take ESG risk as a responsibility too. So once they inculcate those risk responsibilities into the system, not only financial but non-financial aspect can be taken, and that could help you to take many great initiatives forward as well. And normally you have sustainability committees, you have CSR committees, you have nomination committees. Those are best practices that has been followed. In India, you normally see a nomination and audit committee, but nowadays companies are having CSR committee along with a sustainability committee and also risk committee too. Risk committee, you can either have an option, either have a risk committee or audit and risk committee. But it's good to have two different committees because you can have independent thinking and non-conflicts as well. So those are the very key factors as well. So the board should be well wise about the current ESG practices. How they should have a quarterly checks on ESG practices within the company. So that reflects that to the investor that the company is not only tilted towards financial information, they also tilted towards ESG as well. That also gives an additional value to the startups. So these all things should be considered. I think one of the main aspect could be, let's say, ESG rating part. Many of the startups have this idea where can we get rated in the ESG rating agency or not? Yes, you can, but normally the ESG rating companies only rate the publicly listed companies. So if you have any intentions of becoming a public listed company in the next 3 years or after like 5 years or 6 years, it's better to be ESG. It's better to have an ESG inculcated into your system operation beforehand, so that even after they're going to rate you, you can have a higher score. Once you have a higher score, you can go for an IPO. Normally, you can go for an IPO that could also improve your share price as well. So that also takes into place. For the stakeholders, the crucial stakeholders are your employees. If you take care of your employees, then you're going to have a very good feedback in the market as well. So taking care of the employee doesn't mean taking them out for a trip, giving them high incentives and all. It means that you're taking care in health and safety, training them adequately, requirement of the skills required in this operations. Not the skills not even required in operation, even they do have a desire to learn something new, encouraging them, motivating them, and training them. So that impacts a very good rating as well in a ESG perspective. So these are the few things. The stakeholders are very necessary. ESG is an internal thing, but stakeholders is an external thing. So we need to keep both in mind. So that's my insights. Over to you, Arpit.
Thank you, Amit, for very aptly summarizing this. I think a common refrain that we heard from both Dr. Nitin and Amit was on the different stages of a startup, and even at the 3-year mark or even sometime in the future, your priorities have to evolve and change. So while you look to consolidate your value, your business model, and your returns in the initial phase, you should start and innovate more. I think the focus is more on innovating to stay relevant and also keep attracting investments throughout the life cycle of the company. We all know of the famous food startup in India called Zomato. Now, while it was established sometime back in 2010, they are even relevant today in 2022, when their CEO on the World Environment Day this year announced that Zomato has been able to offset about 500,000 tons of carbon emissions by delivering their food products through electric vehicles and scooters. And they have also been able to reduce plastic waste generation by 300 tons. And they also have 50% women directors on the Zomato board. So, across environmental, social, and governance-related aspects, they have now started prioritizing to still stay attractive today, capitalize on the value, increase their valuation in the market, and keep attracting, investments and maintain a healthy sort of business outlook. So their priorities have evolved over the time, and that is probably the similar kind of perspective that Dr. Nitin and Amit provided us with. So, Amit, based on your session and your talk today, I would just have 2 reflections, and if you could sort of present your views on them. First of all, when we are talking about coalitions such as the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment or ESG ratings and methodologies and assessment, would you think, or do you feel that the minimum standards or the criteria of the UNPRI today are sort of too relaxed and are unable to create any tangible change within the investment ecosystem, because the minimum standards are probably bare minimum, and those are generally expected of ethical companies to generally adhere to. And secondly, given the lack of standardized methodology around assessment of ESG risks or even consolidating or measuring ESG outcomes, there are a lot of frameworks available. Dr. Nitin also mentioned there's the GRI, there's the SASB, there's BRSR. How do you think companies can start assessing these risks and quantify the impacts, also when the minimum standards are sort of quite relaxed, and if a company actually wants to create impact, what is the path that they should adopt?
So before you answer that, give me 1 second. If you have any questions for the people that are here with us in this session, please remember to use the Q&A. Just type in the questions, and if it's relevant to the topic we're talking right now, we'll check them and answer them. Otherwise, at the end, we'll have time for your questions. So use that Q&A box, please, and type in your questions. Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you, madam. And thanks, Arpit, for asking this question. I think they're very relevant in these days. For the first part of the question, whether the minimum standards of the UNPRI are too relaxed or not. They are relaxed, they are easy, because investors normally what they have to do, they have to abide to the 6 principles of UNPRI and have an RI policy in place in-house. And also after 2 years of time, they only can publish the UN transparency report, where they have to sort of showcase what the company is doing in the past 2 years or what they have taken initiatives, right? So normally in that transparency report, they also explain about the whole deal life cycle, what they have done, what they're going to do in future, what are the roles and responsibility of the personnel that has taken into account, and what they have done individually, and what the company has done in terms of initiatives, in terms of community development, any ESG trainings or not to the portfolio companies or within the organization or not. So that, again, yes, that is very ethically best practice to be followed by each and every company. But again, it's a start. It's sort of a push start for each and every investor to acknowledge that fact. Okay, there's along with the financial ROI, there's something called responsible investment where we can add non-financial aspect too. So once investors start to see these things. Normally in the Indian market too, we have several thematic funds going on. several ESG mutual funds also come into place. So that's a increase in the market flow as well from the investor side. That okay, now we have to little bit focus upon ESG thematic funds too, become a more responsible investors. So yes, again, they are little bit difficult because a change is always going to be difficult for anyone, be it a company, be it an investor, startup, anyone. So once they can adapt to the changes, that's the reason why UNPR has given 2 years of time to publish their first transparency report, so that they could adopt it and they could adapt the changes as well within the system as well as in the portfolio companies too. So I think yes, it is a little bit difficult, but again, it's too relaxed as well because they do have a time. And your second part of the question was about standardization and methodology of the risk. So again, GRI, SASB, SDG goals, they all can be taken to place, for assessing what risk can be taken. So normally to see the risk, you have to see where the opportunity is. Wherever the opportunity, there's going to be risk attached to it as well. So normally what a company should do or may consider to do is to have a materiality assessment test within the organization. So once they do that, so that again takes all these stakeholders into place, be it customer, be it employees, suppliers, government, investors, everyone. So on these stakeholders, they understand what are the key issues are there from the company, what are the key priorities from their end as well. Because the key priorities will be the key opportunity for them, and the key opportunity will be the key deliverable from their startup as well. So once they get to know what the deliverable is and where the opportunity is, the risk will be always attached to it. So let's say, for example, if energy efficiency is one of the main criteria for the investor, right? They want to invest in more and more renewable energy. If they see that the company is using more of a fossil fuel, and and they have to invest more on renewable energy, right? So that will be in a higher risk format, because normally they have to invest heavily and they'll have to see the output of the renewable energy. So exactly. So materiality assessment can be done in GRI, can be done in the SASB as well, since they have a materiality index as well. Then also for the beginners, they can always use the SDG goals as a baseline to do the materiality test. That's the basic thing that any startup can do within the organization. And for that, they can hire any big four, any consultancy firms to help them out, because that will be the expert advice will be always needed for the risk assessment. So I think that will be my answer.
Thank you so much, Amit, for adequately summarizing that. Thank you for your insights. Camilla, do we have any questions flowing in right now, or would you like me to summarize today's session and take it towards closure?
There was someone that raised their hand, but I don't know who it was. So that's why I said to please write the question, but they have not. So we're gonna just go ahead. I was going to. Okay, you leave them to I just have one question. This is from my side of wanting to learn a little bit about this. So here in India, how do you see this ESG being applied? Is it still very loose? Let's say, I know the government now requires from some of the companies to do reporting, but else, how is it working around the different states? Are there specific policies being made, or is it still very much people wanting to do this because they are seeing it happening in other countries?
I think taking a cue from both Dr. Nitin and Amit's sessions, and as well as what generally I also spoke about a little while earlier, what we see is there is a huge influx and positioning from the investor community who's really prioritizing ESG related investments and impact investments. The number of mutual funds or assets which are managed through ESG related funds are increasing. The number of signatories to the principles of responsible investment from India has increased from just about 8 in 2020 to over 26 in 2021. So that's a huge jump by over 3 times, where more investors are signing up for the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment. So I think most companies and their board are facing increasing risk and scrutiny from the investor community, because most of these investors are your global large investors. They are the BlackRocks and the State Streets and the large pension funds of Canada, Japan, Australia, Australia, and so on. So all of these large institutional investors today want to guarantee long-term sustainability of the funds and long-term return. So they are influencing change through proxy voting, through board-level resolutions, and nudging companies to undertake more ambitious and strong targets on ESG and actually mitigate ESG-related risks. So which is why you would see a lot of the larger Indian companies today voluntarily adopt a lot of ESG related targets and guidelines and benchmarks. And while any investment firm, PE firm, or a venture capitalist firm won't penalize a company for not doing ESG, I think the penalty will come from customers directly, because the millennial customer today and the evolving consumer landscape today, they are preferring conscious brands and sustainable brands over traditional brands. There was a recent survey by Capgemini, which interviewed consumer community within India, and about 88% of consumers in India said that they were willing to purchase a sustainable product if they were made aware of sustainability issues. Similarly, there was an Oracle ESG survey of 1,000 Indian respondents, and 93% of Indian consumers believe that it's not just enough to disclose on ESG, but companies need to create sufficient action on ESG and actually take and show and demonstrate action on sustainable products and sustainable goods. So I think that's something that I would say. Amit or Dr. Nitin, feel free to add on to this.
I think SEBI is also sort of pushing this responsible investment and promoting ESG investment in the country. I think last year itself, on October, they have notified that each and every AMC should have an RI policy within the system. Only those AMC basically who have an ESG thematic fund in India, and that promotes the investors as well. These thematic funds will eventually invest in startup as well in the coming few years, and that's going to add more value to the Startup India programs and Made in India options. And I think most of the startups are affiliated with government's incubatory systems as well. So once SEBI does roll out more and more policies, I think BRSR is going to be compulsory for each and every company, like in the next 2 years, 1.5 years more. Once that takes into consideration, company will start take more actions into this, and they'll be more proactive towards ESG. Once they do that, I think that's going to impact heavily in the Indian economy, especially in the financial markets too. So I think let's keep our fingers crossed that we're going to see more and more transition in ESG, especially in the financial markets too. So yeah.
Just to add one or two liner here, that couple of sectors were so much in bad shape. If we see 5 years back, like cement and steel are two sectors which has the maximum carbon emissions. But if we see after COVID, they are also bringing technologies. They are bringing technology to create power and reuse their waste which was going outside. So those sort of things have started happening. That is number one. Number two, government policies are playing a crucial role here. So if we see automotive policies, extension to directly BS6 has given a good thrust to all the automotive to actually cut down a lot of environmental issues. And at the same time, we are also talking about expanding our targets of renewable energies for the entire nation, which is also giving good confidence for small and medium enterprises to even look after those sort of energy solutions, and then to pivot their traditional or conventional business systems to adopt those sort of things. So government policies, always it is crucial, but Indian government, we all can see that there is a very organized way transformation is happening, and maybe after 10 years we can be the best economy in the world.
I think I'd like to add one more point. I think the carbon credits of markets going to open up in India soon by the government of India. I think that's going to be a revolutionary change for especially the startups as well, because they'll be having abundance carbon credits within the system, and they can trade those credits with other company and get some more funds into their banks, and that's going to be a crucial thing too. Or they could use those funds to enhance their ESG initiatives. So once they start thinking out of the box, that will be helpful for the startups as well. So I think over to you, Arpit. I think, yeah.
Thank you so much. So I think I'm just conscious of the time, and in case we don't have any questions, I'll just briefly start summarizing the session from today. So what we generally understood, and from the speeches of Dr. Nitin and Amit, what we can generally understand is, and I would like to summarize it in sort of a format that I think would be easy to adapt by startups. I think there could be a 5-step approach which startups can today take to integrate ESG. I think at the beginning, what they'll have to do is they'll have to analyze their business model. It is very important to understand what are your dependencies, what are your key raw materials, who are your direct customers, and what exactly the value your product is serving or service is serving in the market today. And it is at this stage that you will be able to realize which suppliers to partner with for your raw materials. Are those suppliers ethical? Are they from countries that promote terrorism? Are they funded by blood money, or whether those suppliers itself are ethical? And you can then make a conscious commitment to your customers that you are providing them safe and sustainable products. Amit gave an example of egg manufacturers, right? So if your poultry is sourced from cruelty free sources, if the poultry itself is cruelty free, if your cosmetics are cruelty free, they will be preferred by the new brand of conscious customers that we have today. So it's very important to analyze your business landscape and your business model itself to try and understand what are the dependencies and value you can unlock. At the next level, I think what a startup should be doing is identifying what are the relevant ESG issues for them. Throughout this conversation today, we have highlighted many environmental, social, and governance topics, but only a few would be relevant to a company. So we need to analyze and identify which are those material topics. And Amit mentioned this in his talk today, that they have to prioritize these material topics. You cannot have action on all 20 items together at the same time, at the same level of your journey. You will then have to prioritize which actions you want to take today. You might want to manage your waste today, but you can focus on your gender diversity 2 years later, or vice versa. There are tech-based startups who, and we hear this very often, that servers generally consume a lot of power. So if you're providing your tech-based services to geographies or locations, they would also want to source from servers which are so on the cloud, which source renewable energy. So what are these decisions that you want to take today, and prioritize those ESG related areas that you can focus on. The next step would be to measure your impact. So Dr. Nitin mentioned this, and Amit also mentioned this. How do you want to go about measuring this impact that you're creating? If you are offsetting some amount of carbon, if you are, if your product is offsetting carbon, if you are reducing waste, if you are utilizing your own waste. For example, in the case of cement plants or most industries, you can co-generate power through the waste heat that's being generated in your factory. A lot of the fly ash that is generated in cement manufacturing can be in sort of power generation through coal usage, can be used to make bricks, and can be used as construction material itself. So how are we leveraging those opportunities, and how can we measure this impact that we are creating by substituting materials today? And finally, the last step for any startup would be to communicate their results. Today, you will have to communicate the impact that you're creating to your ESG funders, so your VCs and the lending institutions that you're taking the funds from. You'll have to communicate it to the regulators, because there will be minimum pollution control standards and reporting requirements that you have to adhere to. And most importantly, you will have to communicate it to your customers and business partners, because today customers want to associate with sustainable brands, and business partners want to associate with brands that are creating social value. So with that, I think I would like to close the session and the talk today. Over to you, Camilla, to give any concluding thoughts, or just conclude the session then.
Thank you so much, Arpit, and thank you so much for being a part of this session. I really learned a lot today. A lot of things were very, very clear on how people can implement this from an early start. And as you said, not go for every single thing from the beginning. Otherwise, you'll just be overwhelmed by everything that you have to do. So that is one thing that I'll take. And I really like the example you gave about Tesla, because I think for the first time we are seeing how consumers are the ones that are driving change. And sometimes we think that change has to be made by huge companies that adopt this thing, so that it kind of becomes a trend for the rest. And what we're seeing is that now consumers have realized that they are the ones who have the power to make companies make these changes. They are the ones that are buying, they are the ones that are making the decisions. And they are also willing to let their brands know that they don't want to buy this, they want to buy sustainable stuff. And the change takes time. Unfortunately, we do not have that much of a time because of all that we're seeing, right, with climate change and all. And there are a lot of people that have already been working in this space, in the sustainability space for years, and they've been very patient, right? But I think that the speed at which we are seeing these changes is everything is happening a bit faster than before. So hopefully we'll see all these changes come sooner. So thank you everyone that was part of this session. We'll have this up on YouTube as well, so you can rewatch it, because I think this is something that I'll definitely rewatch it several times just to unpack everything that you shared. It was very, very interesting and informative and very simple to understand at the same time. So thank you so much, Amit and Dr. Nitin and Arpit, for coming on this very, I think, a very important topic for this time, and something that definitely needs to be, people need to be more educated around these things, and there needs to be more awareness around ESG reporting, so that people understand this is not a very difficult, demanding thing that you need to have a lot of money to do this, or just the big companies should do it. It's something that everyone can start working on from an early stage. So thank you everyone, and I hope we can do this some other time as well. I hope I can have you on board with projects in the future. Thank you so much.